One exception, though, is Mishka the sea otter. She was the first known case of a sea otter to develop asthma. And they actually have trained Mishka to swim up to an inhaler, bump the inhaler, get a puff of medicine, and then keep swimming around. And I've heard that she actually holds her inhaler too when she swims around, which is pretty cute. So Mishka is definitely a favorite in the Seattle Aquarium, but I definitely recommend visiting the aquarium if you have time. That's one of my favorite attractions on the waterfront. And it's been around since the late 70s too. So quite a few. Yeah, Pike Place is awesome. It's a really big attraction for tourists, but also for locals too. My coworkers and I were just talking about our favorite restaurants in Pike Place. There are actually 5 levels too, so you can really walk around, get lost in there, intentionally or not. I've definitely gotten lost in there. But that's a super cool spot. The Gum Wall, the famous Seattle Gum Wall, is right outside of Pike Place Market. Also, the famous fish throwers are up on the 5th level of Pike Place. And the Seattle waterfront has gone through a pretty significant transformation in the past like 10 years. Back in 2018, they started removing a double-decker highway, the Alaska Way Viaduct. So this whole waterfront area was a highway. It wasn't nearly as accessible to pedestrians as it is now. And the steps that you can see behind us, those are all new bike paths. So it's been a pretty significant upgrade for the Seattle waterfront, and we're pretty proud of it. Any of you here on a cruise? Or going on a cruise? Well, this is where some of the cruise ships will come in. This was Seattle's first cruise terminal. They selected this location because of the steep drop-off. So this allowed the huge cruise ships to come up close to the waterfront. So some other locations wouldn't have worked because the ships would have run aground. And you can see where people come in on the ramps, kind of similar to airports. They leave the cruise ships and then they'll be able to walk around the downtown. Our hotel was built for the 1962 World's Fair. Seattle was expecting to get around 10 million people for the World's Fair. So the Edgewater wanted to capitalize on this and make a hotel that people could stay in for the fair. Unfortunately, the Edgewater Hotel opened, so they were off to a bit of a rocky start. They had to get creative with how to get guests in now that there weren't 10 million people in Seattle. So they decided to start putting advertisements in fishing and hunting magazines saying that they were the only hotel in the world where you could fish out of your window. And so, of course, people were intrigued by this idea, and it was very popular, but as you might expect, they ran into a few problems. Once you catch a fish in your hotel room, you have to clean it. A lot of these hotel rooms had carpets, so it made quite a mess. People were trying to keep them alive in their bathtubs, putting salt from the kitchen in there, which didn't work. So eventually, 20 years later, which is surprising that it lasted that long, they abandoned that in the 80s. But also in the early 60s, in 1964, the Beatles came to Seattle. And if you know anything about the Beatles, their fans were quite intense in the early years. One of the reasons they had to stop touring was because they could hardly hear themselves play. But they underestimated Beatlemania. People were jumping in the water, bribing workers to sneak in on laundry carts. So they ended up making it in to the Edgewater Hotel anyways. But we don't know what they did with their fish, if they made a mess or anything in the room, but yeah, that's a pretty iconic photo. And you might have noticed that the piers are built at an angle rather than straight out. And this is so that when trains were coming up in the early days of Seattle, when trains were coming up to these piers and delivering goods, this was an easier angle for them to pull into and pull out of, rather than turning 90 degrees and pulling back out. And so they still have the same shape and orientation today. So we are coming up on the closest and most unobstructed view of the Space Needle. If you want to take a picture, this is a great time. I'll talk about the Space Needle a little later in the tour on the other side of the loop. But this is a great photo opportunity. So right in front of the Space Needle, this park we see here, this is Olympic Sculpture Park. This is an extension of the Seattle Art Museum, or the SAM as local. This was the headquarters for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. This is Seattle's first newspaper. It was actually founded before Seattle was itself in the mid-1800s. This globe used to actually rotate and light up. Unfortunately, it doesn't anymore, but local museum and the Post-Intelligencer are trying to get it back in working condition. The Post-Intelligencer was actually the first major newspaper to move to online only in 2017, and a lot of newspapers have followed suit after that. This hill we see here on our right or our starboard side with the three large cell towers, this is a neighborhood of Queen Anne. So Queen Anne used to be called Eden Hill. Not very many people lived there. It was densely forested. There was a very steep grade, so it was hard to build on. But as the roads extended from Queen Anne and the downtown, you might notice how flat it is, kind of where the Space Needle is. So there actually used to be another hill here, but in the early 1900s, Seattle underwent a massive regrading project to make it easier to build buildings and build roads out from the downtown. Seattle used to be quite hilly. It still is pretty hilly, but it used to be even more so. So they would pump in around 20 million gallons of water from Lake Washington, just east of us. And in total, for the regrading project, they moved around 45 million tons of earth. And the biggest hill that they removed was Denny Hill, which was between the downtown and kind of where the Space Needle sits now. So there are some really cool pictures if you look up the Seattle regrading project in the early 1900s. There are these massive pillars of earth. Some people refused to move it initially, so they just left their house there and carved around it. And eventually they gave in and moved. But that's a pretty cool piece of Seattle side. This is called a bulk carrier. So you can see these gravity chutes going down to these compartments here. You can see they're numbered 25, 35, 45. So here they will drop Seattle's #1 export by volume, which is cattle grade grain, and they'll drop it loose into these compartments and seal them when they're full. You might be surprised that Seattle, their #1 export is grain. You might think that would be somewhere in the Midwest, and Seattle does not grow very much grain on their own, but it's actually sent over to our Asian trading partners because Seattle is a day closer to major Asian countries than other ports on the West Coast. Port side, kind of behind us, it contains 4 million bushels of grain. And you see it says the Louis Dreyfus Company. If there are any Seinfeld fans, this is Julia Louis-Dreyfus's family, or Elaine Dennis. Past the grain silos, this campus we see here is the global headquarters for Expedia. Some of you might have used Expedia to get to Seattle today. It was previously owned by a biotechnology company called Amgen. So all the way to the right of the beige buildings here, this is where Seattle's fishing fleet leaves and comes back to. So they'll bring the fish they catch here, and it'll be processed and frozen and stored in these facilities. And a lot of the fishing boats will go up to Alaska on their big trawlers, and they mostly fish for wild Alaskan pollock. Before we were able to freeze fish on the boat, pollock wasn't very popular because it went bad fairly quickly. But now since we can freeze fish on the boat, it lasts much longer. And pollock is used in fillet of fish, imitation crab, cat food, fish sticks. So it's quite a versatile fish. And a lot of that is caught up in Alaska by these fishermen. 90 and Pier 91. This structure we see here on Pier 91, this is Seattle's second cruise terminal. So cruise ships can go on either side. There's none in right now, but after Seattle built the first cruise terminal, the Bell Street Cruise Terminal, in the early 2000s, it was so popular that they built another one. Now Seattle is one of the busiest cruise ports in the entire country. To our left, our port side, we're getting a pretty cool view of Mount Rainier. You can't quite see the bottom, which kind of makes it look like it's floating. I love when it looks like this. The first time I saw Mount Rainier, I almost drove off in the lower 48. And Mount Rainier is a straddle, like the Cascades. They're not quite as large either. The tallest peak is just over 7,000 feet tall. The tallest peak is Mount Olympus, which you can't see right now. It's tucked behind some of the other peaks in front of us. When it was built, it was the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And it was actually the tallest building in the Seattle skyline until the Space Needle was built. So it really shows you how much the Seattle skyline has grown recently. A lot of the newer buildings are these tall ones we see here, so a bit of a delayed start for the Seattle skyline, but it's cool to see how much it's caught up. So we are about halfway through our tour. I'm going to hop off the mic and take a break for about 5 to 10 minutes, but I'll be walking around. If anybody has any questions or wants their picture taken, I'd be happy to. And I'll be back for the more industrial part of our tour. Thanks. That's how you know it's an icebreaker. They can break through 20 feet of ice. So for reference, the top deck, third deck here, all the way down to the water, is about 20 feet. So that's quite thick that they can break through. So they'll push up onto the ice, and then the weight of the ship will crash down and break through.
Dry dock.
On our port side again, in dry dock, is a Washington State ferry. This one's getting some work done. So you can see with the dry docks, there's a U shape here. So on the side walls, they're actually hollow on the inside. And they will fill these with water, which sinks the dock, and they'll put blocks at the bottom in the shape of the ship that they're going to do work on. And then tugboats will push the ship in, and then they'll pump all the water out from the sidewalls and lift the boat up. This process takes a while to get everything right. It takes a while to get all the water out, but this is how they do maintenance on the boats. If they need to get them inspected, our ships need to get inspected, and they go into dry dock like this. That's pretty cool. Here we have a massive container ship, the MSC. It's just over 1,200 feet long. So if you were to stand this up on its stern, it would be taller than the tallest building in the Seattle skyline. So this is a massive, massive ship. Going over the ship here, these large cranes, these are called gantry cranes. So these are the machines that will load and unload the container ships when they come into the Western Waterway or the Eastern Waterway. You can see the glass box kind of in the middle and under the central structure in the gantry crane, and this is where the crane operator sits. And there's a glass floor, so they can see underneath them where they're pulling the containers. Oh, one's waving to us. So they can load and unload a container every 1 to 2 minutes, which is a pretty insane pace for how large these are and how large the cranes are. And they're actually assembled fully in China, and then they're shipped over. They're welded onto the top of a cargo ship and sent over 3 to 4 at a time, which is pretty incredible if you ever see them coming into Seattle, or if you look up a picture of gantry cranes in transport. It's pretty wild how they don't topple over off the boat. So the containers you see on here, you might notice that there are some shorter ones up at the bow of the boat. So these containers are in 20-foot equivalent units. So a lot of the ones you see on this boat are in the 40-foot equivalent units, but there's also 20 feet and 45 feet. This is a measurement that the whole world has agreed to use, one of the few things the whole world can agree on. It was conceived by a trucker in North Carolina in the 1950s, who saw how easy it was to get things on and off of his trailer in the back of his truck. And he said, why aren't the shipping containers shaped like this? Before they were all like this, they were in crates and bags and boxes, and unloading ships was a super long process. It would take them even longer to load and unload than it would to sail across the ocean. So this has really revolutionized global shipping.
12,000.
So a lot of these are 40-foot equivalent units, but if they were the shorter 20-foot units, this boat at its capacity could carry that much.
12,000.
And it might not seem like all this on top is that amount of containers, but these ships, for every one container you see above the deck, there's one below it. So they're set quite low, and they stack the containers in the hull of the ship as well. The largest container ship we've seen in Seattle is 18,000 TEUs, as they're called. They're 20-foot equivalent units. It's hard to imagine how they get much bigger than this one. I love seeing these huge ships here. So we're coming back out of the Western Waterway now. Right behind us, you see this old abandoned-looking building here. This was the Fisher Flour Mill, and it sits on Harbor Island, which is a man-made island constructed in the early 1900s. And Fisher Island was the first island to be constructed, or sorry, the first building to be constructed on Harbor Island. Since Seattle
Harbor Island
was
all
born,
man-made.
since the early days of Seattle. It was originally an estuary, a tidal estuary, so this is all marshy areas. And it extended from West Seattle, which you see here on our left, our port side, all the way down to the stadiums, which we'll be able to see in a second. And they actually dredged and scooped all of this earth out from this area, so large ships. Earlier, this is the neighborhood of West Seattle. You can actually take the ferry from downtown Seattle to West Seattle. This is still in the city limits, so it is a neighborhood of Seattle. It's the largest and oldest neighborhood in the city as well. West Seattle's really cool. There are some great shops, great restaurants, some great beaches here. You can see the ferry going over there now. So that's a really cool area to check out as well.
West Seattle. Dry dock for the US Coast Guard ship. It's hollow inside. They fill the water on the sides.
left side, as we turn, you can see a Washington State Ferry. Looks like it's headed for Bainbridge Island, which is that landmass you see in front of the Olympic Mountains. You might notice too how the state ferries are perfectly symmetrical on each side. So they have a wheelhouse on both sides, and rudders on both sides. So this will allow them to just pull in and out of wherever they're going. They don't have to back in and turn around. They can just start going the other direction. Washington has the largest ferry system in the United States and the 4th largest in the world. I love taking the ferries. They have incredible hot dogs, believe it or not. One of the best hot dogs I've ever had was on the Washington State ferries. So if you have a chance, you should definitely get one. So past the U.S. Polar Star, the icebreaker, this is the U.S. Gabrielle Giffords. This is a littoral combat ship, and it's also a trimaran, which means it has 3 points of contact with the water. They're really cool looking if you get an opportunity to look it up. We can't quite see the design from here because there's a lot that's covering the ship. The white tarps that they have on are actually to protect paint from sandblasting, from getting in the water. So they're not doing anything super secretive, they're just trying to protect the bay. This ship was named after a U.S. Congresswoman from Arizona who survived an assassination attempt. It's the 16th boat to be named after someone who is still alive, and the 13th ship in the U.S. Navy to be named after a woman. The next ship you see, which is not in dry dock, this is a USS Captain Kidd, or the USS Kidd, sorry. It's named after Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd. That's kind of a tongue twister. He was the highest ranking naval officer to be killed in the attacks on Pearl Harbor. And when they asked his widow if they could name the ship after him, she said yes, but only under one condition. And that was that they could fly the Jolly Roger flag, which is the pirate flag. So as Isaac Kidd made his way up through his ranks in the Navy, he acquired the nickname Captain Kidd. And so they are the only ship in the U.S. Navy that can fly this flag. And then past the USS Kidd is the USS Sampson. This boat just came in yesterday, which is pretty cool to see another Navy ship here in the bay. It was in Everett, which is just further up the bay, further up the Sound here in Washington. And this ship was actually used in the movie Battleship, which came out pretty recently. And it's the same kind of ship as a USS Kidd. It's a guided missile destroyer. So these black and yellow barges we see here, these are called bunker barges. So these are pretty much like floating gas stations. So they'll go up to the cruise ships or any ship that needs fuel and fuel them up, which makes it easier for the ships that are in port or at the cruise terminals, that they don't have to go into these areas to fuel up. They're called bunker barges because bunkers are named for fuel, because historically the coal that was used for steamships was stored in large bunkers in the ship, so they still call it bunker. This big barge we see here, this is an Alaskan Marine Lines barge. So these barges will be shipped up to Alaska. It's much more convenient to use barges to go up to Alaska because they don't have to go through customs. So it saves quite a bit of time. It also is much more of a straight line than you would go if you went by rail or by road up to Alaska. So sometimes you can see some pretty unique things on top of these barges. Right now we see it's got a truck on top, but whatever they need in Alaska they'll put on the barge here. The tugboat will push or pull it up. We've got another big container ship here in the Eastern Waterway on our starboard side. And then you can see a gantry crane in operation. They're not loading or unloading. They might be practicing or testing something out. The gantry cranes, oh, you can't see it's loading a container onto the ship, which is pretty cool. This ship's not quite as large. It's 800 feet long. I believe only 4,000 TEUs, but still pretty huge. So this first stadium you see here on the right side, the darker one, this is T-Mobile Park. This is home to the Seattle Mariners, which is Seattle's Major League Baseball team. This stadium cost over $500 million to make, and it has a retractable roof. The roof can go on and off the stadium in just 10 minutes. And it uses the similar structures, or the similar mechanics to these the wheels and the gantry cranes, which you can see roll on, and allows them to cover the stadium pretty quickly. The Seattle Mariners are the only team in Major League Baseball to have never made it to a World Series. The Mariners came really close last year. We were one game away from making it to the World Series, but we lost to the Blue Jays. So we're hoping this year is our year to make it to the World Series. You may have heard of some players on the Mariners. Cal Raleigh. He last year broke the record for the most on the left side. This is Lumen Field. This was the host stadium for the FIFA World Cup. The United States just played Belgium here yesterday and unfortunately lost. Yeah, good for you guys. You must be happy. And so it was called Seattle Stadium for the span of the tournament, but now it'll be back to Lumen Field. This is home to the Seattle Seahawks, the reigning Super Bowl champions. It's also home to the Seattle Sounders, which is the men's, the MLS team, and the Seattle Reign Football Club, which is the women's professional soccer team. Lumen Field has a bit of a unique design. It's got like a clamshell shape. This was actually intentionally done to make the stadium louder inside. So Lumen Field is one of the loudest stadiums in Seattle. The one that we saw earlier was departing from here.
Coleman Dock.
And we're coming back onto Pier 55. So that wraps up the tour. I'm also the deckhand, so I have to go tie up the boat. But I will be the last face you see as you depart. So if you have any questions or comments, or you want some recommendations, please let me know. Thank you so much.
And have a nice big round of applause for Jeremiah. Jeremiah does a fantastic job for us here at Argosy Cruises. I'm glad you folks got to spend the last hour with him. And as he mentioned, he's not only your tour guide today, but he's also one of our deckhands. He's going to head down and prepare to tie the boat up. If you have any final questions for Jeremiah, want to get any recommendations of things to